I'm going to start out this video and go over the multi-year cycle one more time. I know I did it in my last video, but in case there's anybody new here. Um, what we usually have is a 4-year cycle, and in '98 we had a 4-year cycle low, and then just about 4 years later, in 2002, we had our next 4-year cycle low. Every once in a while, one of these cycles will stretch, and that is what happened here from 2002 to 2009. The 4-year cycle stretched, and we should have gone down into the 4-year cycle in 2006, but it was kind of aborted. And we got the housing bubble, which pumped the stock market up again. And anyway, this multi-year cycle stretched into a 7-year cycle. And typically what happens is after a long cycle, you'll get a short cycle. So our next 4-year cycle came about 2.5 years later here in 2011. Then now we're back to the regular 4-year cycle timing band in 2016. And I don't see any catalyst right now for the current 4-year cycle to deviate. So we should probably expect the next larger degree correction, something similar to this or this. These were both almost 20% corrections. We should see something similar to this in late 2019 into the middle of 2020. And so the question now is whether or not this intermediate cycle is going to take off, quickly move above these all-time highs and then become parabolic, and maybe we go to 4 or 5,000 here in between now and summer. And if that were to happen, then I would say yes, we probably did complete the parabolic phase of a bubble, and then I would expect the market to generally move lower from that point until we get our final bottom sometime around probably the spring of 2020, as these last two multi-year cycle lows here and here both occurred early in the year. So that's one scenario, and that was my preferred scenario because I believe that all of the money printing that has gone on throughout the world since 2009 should have consequences, and I think the consequences should be a bubble rather than a long-term secular bull market that still has another 10 or 15 years to go. We'll know whether or not that scenario is going to play out by first how quickly the market gets back up to these new highs, and then whether or not we start to develop a melt-up phase in the next 2 or 3 months. If we don't do that, and I'm kind of starting to lean in the direction that we may not, that instead we may just continue this bull market move in this 4-year cycle will top maybe sometime in early to mid 2019, and then we get our move down, possibly, as we start to move into the elections, if it becomes clear that Trump is going to be defeated, and then if the Democrats get in, and if things tend to go back to how they were before, I don't think that would be good for the economy. We may even run into a little trouble here at the end of 2018 if the Democrats take one of the houses and it becomes much more difficult for Trump to continue his pushing his pro-business policies. So anyway, my feeling is that while I think we should get some kind of a big parabolic move here in the next 4 or 5 months, I kind of suspect that's probably not going to happen. Instead, we're just going to continue this chug higher, while it probably will continue to be aggressive, especially as we work into the elections towards the latter part of the year. But if that's the case, I doubt that we're going to get to 5,000 by the middle of the year. We may get to 4 or 5,000 by the middle of 2019. So let me switch over to the NASDAQ real quick. All right, so what I think could very well play out, as we've seen, we've gone from election night, we've basically gone from about 5,000 to 7,500, which is about halfway to 10,000. We would all love to see this breakout and go up to 10,000 in the next 3 or 4 months, and that is, certainly a possibility. But I'm starting to lean more in the camp that we're going to get to 10,000, but it's going to be either later in 2018 towards the end of the year, or maybe into 2019, and then at that point the stocks would start to move down into the next 4-year cycle low from a top at 10,000, as opposed to a big parabolic move over the next few months, which is, it is still possible. We have to see how the move starts to play out once we get a breakout to new highs. And if the thing, everything starts to become very aggressive and we start to see the retail public really get attached to this market and create a buying frenzy, then it's not out of the question that we could go up to 10,000 very quickly by summer. And then at that point, I think we would have our top for our 4-year cycle, and then it would be a long bear market move down into the next 4-year cycle low in 2020. But I'm really starting to shy away from that scenario. I think we're going to get to 10,000, but I think it's going to take longer, and it may be the end of this year before we get there, or it may even be into the middle of 2019 before we get there. We are going to get there, but if this actually is a long-term secular bull market that still has another 10 or 15 years to run, then 10,000 is not going to be the top of this bull market by any means. That would be more in line of like where we were at in 1987, and then we had the crash. So I could see us getting to 10,000, let's say by the middle of 2019, and then having a serious bear market, possibly a mild recession that would bring the NASDAQ all the way back down to 7,500 at our next 4-year cycle low. And then after that, we would have another 10 or 15 years yet before this bull market was over. So while I think all the years of money printing should deliver a bubble, I'm starting to lean a little bit more in favor of it taking a little bit longer to get to 10,000, and then still having many years left in this bull market before we get a final top. Now, the strategy, of course, is the same either way. We want to be long. We want to be leveraged out of intermediate cycle lows. So, nothing is going to change in how we trade the market. It's just it may just take us a little longer to get to 10,000 than we would all hope, and actually, a more protracted move to 10,000 would be much better for the economy. It would signal that we still have many years left in this bull market, and even though we would probably have some kind of at least mild recession in 2020, it would be nothing different than what we had in 1991, and it would not be the end of the bull market. We would still have many years left to run, and we could possibly be entering somewhat of a golden age for the global economy over the next 10 or 15 years.